Hey y'all, I am with Cliff Panezich. You may have seen him on TikTok or in Sports Illustrated or in some other places. He's definitely around. Cliff, you have been to prison,
That's right. I did 6 years on a racketeering charge, actually.
and I found you on TikTok. The first video I saw of yours, it was comparing Norway prison conditions compared to US prison conditions. And you were just pointing out how the recidivism rate in Norway is really small compared to, I wanted to say Texas, but the United States prisons, right?
Right, absolutely. And the way Norway prisons run, it's not for all criminals, but the comparison is, especially in state prison, probably where you were at and where I was at, is there is no separation of crime. So myself as a nonviolent offender being in for forgery, I was just mixed in with everybody else, and that's not conducive to rehabilitation. Being thrown into a mix like that to where, one of my first cellmates was doing life without, and he was 2 years in, and his mental state was not stable. And putting somebody else like doing, I don't want to say short time, I did 6 years, but someone like myself in that environment is not conducive to rehabilitation. And that's where Norway gets it right and we get it way wrong. And I got a lot of backlash for it because people think Norway runs their prison system and everybody goes that route. And it's not. Violent offenders are still treated differently. But on a low level, nonviolent offenders should be treated differently. And we have it wrong in this country.
So we have that in common. I have a white collar crime. Did my time in a maximum security prison with people serving double life sentences. So definitely see where you're coming from. Now you have a pretty unique story. And when your crime happened, it was major headlines in Ohio, and Sports Illustrated did a whole spread on you. You had a really promising baseball career. So what kind of, just briefly tell us the events that changed your life, basically, right?
Yeah, so pretty much my entire life from 5 through age 26, I really identified as an athlete, as a baseball player, and that was really my only focus in life. I did good in school and everything, but that was all just a means to an end. Like I did good in school because I was playing baseball. I went to college and graduated college so I could play baseball. So I really made it into professional baseball and got injured. I tore my rotator cuff, and having that stripped away from me is kind of what creates the whole like spiral of events of what do I identify as now? What do I replace baseball with when that thing pretty much encompassed my entire life, all of my time, all of my thoughts, all of my effort, and now it's gone. What do you do? And I just replaced it with all the wrong things, which was in my case drinking and partying, gambling, chasing women. Um, and that's where the crime comes in because what does it take to facilitate all those things is money. And the business started legitimately. It was something I did while I was trying to pursue my career as kind of a side hustle on the weekends. And then once my career ended, it just proliferated and snowballed and turned into this crazy, one of the largest sports memorabilia frauds in US history. And that's just, like I said, because I replaced baseball with all the wrong avenues of things. And that's really the message of what my story is and where people can learn.
I think we find that a lot with athletes when that kind of sport or that kind of dedication that's required to make it far in any kind of sports, even dancing and these kind of things. It takes such a concentration, and you kind of become that person. You are a baseball player, not you are a man that plays baseball. And that definitely happens when something happens like an injury, or maybe you've hit the top of your career. We see that happen a lot. So that storyline is not that unusual. I know you guys definitely want to know more about that part of his story. He shares it unapologetically on all of his platforms, and I'll make sure and put all the links to his platforms here. So you get sentenced to 6 years.
Right. Yes.
And tell me just a little bit about the Ohio prison system and how that was for you.
So again, and every state is different, and so I only tell what my story is in Ohio. Um, the worst of it for me is, I did my time in Ohio, but I was living in Las Vegas, in Nevada. So there's a big separation from really, I left my mother alone in Nevada for 6 years. So that's the hardest of what prison was for me. Um, but again, like I talked about, there's no separation of crime. You know, I came from the suburbs and went to private school and went to college, and you know, in some sense, you know, education is frowned upon in prison. So having a college degree is like, when I went through intake and said I had a college degree, they looked at me like I was lying, like I was crazy, like I don't belong there. And there's a sense of that. And like I said, it's kind of frowned upon. So getting into prison, I really fell in this like middle realm of like, who are the people I hang out with? And it's, you know, prison can be very racial, and but I really couldn't identify with my own race because it's a lot of low level drug offenses. It's hard to transcend into a different race because it just doesn't fit. But you know what fell in my favor, and really how I survived and what made my time manageable is, you know, athletics really transcend race or gang relations in prison. And um, being I was an athlete, being my story was in Sports Illustrated, like garnered me a lot of respect. And I was like, I was that guy in Sports Illustrated. And that made my time smooth enough to like, you know, kind of be maneuvered and not like completely crush me mentally.
That Sports Illustrated spread came out during your incarceration.
It came out very early. It was 6 months into my sentence.
So how did you find out about it? Like, did the mail call come and there you were in somebody's magazine, or
No,
what?
so I was very involved in I interviewed the night before I got sentenced. So I knew it was coming and I knew what issue was getting released in. So like I knew, um, everyone else didn't know. I didn't really cue many people in. And it's funny, I just made a video about this, about talking about, you know, getting paperwork work checked in prison and what your charges are. Because people would ask me, like, do people just believe you when you tell your story? Because it's crazy. It's out there. And I made a video and I'm like, basically, this was my paperwork. Like, here's my story. Um, and again, because state prison is so much low level crime and like non-violent, low level drug offenses, like it garnered me a lot of respect. Not that I'm proud of what my crime was, but in that environment, and this is part of the problem, is that in that environment, you have to wear that kind of as a badge of honor. And so I just wore it and I took it and ran with it. And that's like what made my time smooth. And that's again, that's part of the problem. Like you shouldn't have to wear your crime as a badge of honor to be able to maneuver and manipulate the system. But that's what it became. And I would always say my time in prison was really like an alter ego. Like I was a different person. And I had a nickname. I went by Vegas, just as like many people have nicknames in there. And that's part of the transition of coming home was like, you have to flip that switch back off. Like, hey, I can be who I am again. I can be a normal person. And the time that I really realized that was when I got to my halfway house time, and somebody asked me what my name was, and I said Vegas. And then he was going to leave the room, and I had to stop him. I was like, listen, my name's Cliff. I'm not Vegas. Like my name's Cliff. But that was like a big self-aware moment in like my transition back into society. It's like I don't have to be that guy anymore. Like I don't have to wear my crime as a badge of honor. I can talk about it, but it's not, you know, from a hustler standpoint or how much money was made. And that's what it's like inside the prison. Is that's how you have to own it and act like it, and kind of act like you did these big things to garner respect.
During your halfway house time, so you have this epiphany, kind of like, hey, I'm not Vegas, I'm not, and I call myself, my version, like prison Marci. I was a complete different version, and I definitely did things that I would have never thought to do out here, but were completely appropriate and even expected inside. So how did you change that? I mean, how did you turn that around, that attitude, right? It didn't just happen all at once, or
I mean, it was really that moment I just talked about was really, and I don't know what caused it to happen. Like, just kind of, it was a surreal moment, and I kind of like heard my own words, and was self-aware enough that I was like, I just told this guy my name is Vegas. Like, that's like an alter ego. Like, that's not who I am. And you know, you followed me on TikTok at the time. My halfway house time was a very big mental struggle. It was worse than prison, really. Um, but that was eye opening, and like I knew that had to change. And all the like transitional stuff and rehabilitation I went through in the halfway house was all like you have to do it on your own. they're not there to help you through that process, which is again is a shame and it's wrong. But realizing that early on that it fell on my own shoulders to like make sure I mentally transitioned, like made me super self-aware of what I needed to change to like get back to my normal self again. So just recognizing that very early on, like the first day when I said that, like made me aware of it to like catch myself when I would slip or like talk differently or take on that persona again. And like just being aware of the situation would like help me snap out of it in a lot of instances.
I think for both of us, we were pretty fortunate. We came home with a lot of privilege, right? You definitely had a family that supported you, and you had a family that supported you during your incarceration. And I think mentally, that's something that helps us to be able to identify that the help is not on the outside. It has to come from within. And I think that that's something we've got to work on as a community, because most of the people, I would say, don't have that.
Right.
So
Right.
let's talk about this halfway house, because you and I talked briefly. We both were had to go to a halfway house. And when I talk about my halfway house, I say halfway prison. It still felt like prison. I still had to move like I was in prison to get anything done, because it just wasn't happening. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Absolutely. So in Ohio, the halfway house was required. So I had to do my last 6 months there. COVID slowed it down a little. I had to slow it down a little bit. I ended up doing like 5.5 months. I got there late, but it's very much because they don't care about your transition. Like it's because it's for profit and they really just care about their profits. They're not there to help you transition. So when you, like I said, I became self-aware of like things that needed to be done that were going to help me transition. And I had to circumvent their rules to do that, which again is promoting a criminal mindset for non-criminal behavior. And we just talked about this off camera a little bit, was because there was no outside food allowed and I'm care about my health and my body, I had to smuggle protein powder into the halfway house to have a meal in the evening because I didn't want to eat junk food out of a vending machine. Like that's not conducive to rehabilitation. Like it might seem minor to a lot of people, but part of my transition into society is I don't have to eat nonsense, unhealthy food anymore, right? And that matters to me, but you're forcing that on us. Or I was lucky in the sense that I had a job where my bosses were super understanding and they would manipulate the schedule me for 4 hours, schedule me for 8 hours, but only have me work 4 so I could leave for 4 hours and they'd cover for me. And, I would understand how that would be problematic to the halfway house because they're trying to keep you from being out in the streets. But the time I use for my 4 hours is seeing my aunts and uncles, like went and saw my grandma's old house, went to my grandmother's grave, saw some of my friends. It was very rehabilitative stuff that I couldn't have got approved through the halfway house. Couldn't have got it approved. I couldn't have got an aunt or an uncle on my visitation list. I couldn't have got a pass to go to their house. That's stuff that would have got shot down immediately, but was also the most conducive to my rehabilitation. But I still had to act like a criminal for that to happen. And that's a problem when you're promoting a criminal mindset for non-criminal behavior.
That's exactly right. And then it's set up so that you can't maneuver to prepare for your life outside of the halfway house. You're not able to do the things that you need to move forward with your life, which is what you would think that time would be for.
Right. Like, so there's really an instance I remember, part of the stipulations of the halfway house is like you couldn't work in a mall or be in a mall or a gym.
A gym?
You couldn't go to a gym. So no like big public places like that. And I worked at a Chili's as a food prep. And a lot of the time I would spend in those like 4 hour windows where I had freedom was I would just go across the street to the mall and just walk. I just wanted to be around people. And there'd be some interaction, but I just wanted to be in society in that environment. And I had a moment where I was in the mall and there's like 3 security guards walking towards me. And I'm not doing anything but walking laps in the mall. And I'm borderline have a panic attack because I'm like, I know I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not allowed to be in a mall, but that's not a criminal act. And it was very difficult to break yourself of that mindset because the halfway house still pushed that so much on you. Is that you have all these nonsensical, petty rules and infractions that are non-criminal that they could violate you for, give you, restriction or cell phone restriction or work restriction or send you back to prison. So then what happens? You're teaching yourself to be a better criminal again, but you're not doing anything criminal. And that's a huge problem, huge problem.
So you're working as a prep cook in Chili's, and there's a chick that's working there that says, "Hey, you have a story. You could help people. You should share your story."
Yeah, pretty much. Her name's Autumn, like one of my best friends to this day. She was super supportive. And I knew I had a story because of the Sports Illustrated thing and everything going on, but the social media realm changed immensely in my 6 years I was gone. Before I went in, the thought of a content creator or an influencer like wasn't a thing. So I'm really trying to navigate like how do I tell my story, or what is the value in my story, or who's going to hear it, or how do I get it out there, as well as like public speaking wasn't something I was real thrilled about. But she pushed me in that direction, and I started very early on and how I grew was I was doing a countdown in the halfway house to my freedom. I think I started with like 86 days. But I documented a lot of the struggles I had in the halfway house. And in turn, being on social media helped me mentally through that time. It was such a struggle, more so than prison, because it was like you're so close to freedom, but now I'm getting pushed with all these like even more strict rules than what prison was.
Mm.
I feel like I'm supposed to get more freedoms and I'm having freedoms taken away, and it becomes this real mental struggle. And social media became a very positive place for me in a lot of ways and helped me through that time. And in turn, like that's when I started to grow on social media, because that was a very real time for me, like the struggles I was going through.
I have found that sharing my story online and with my community on my different platforms, has helped me heal some of the trauma that we suffered from the state, some of the trauma that we suffered while committing our crime, because all of that is really traumatic. Both of our crimes hurt people that we love because it removed us from their life for a time. And so do you find that as well? Are you finding community on social media?
Yeah, so and it's crazy how my social media grew and what my analytics were, because it's different than a lot of creators. But it was a lot of mothers who have their kids incarcerated, or wives who had husbands or spouses or fiancés incarcerated. And that it became a very positive environment because of that. And I understood, like, I know how I felt putting my mother through it. And so it became very positive trying to have conversations with these people and like talk to them what's going on. Because I know, if I was in a situation in prison where I went to the hole and my mother doesn't hear from me for a couple of days, I know what I'm putting her through. And now there's people reaching out to me in the same situations, like he hasn't called, what's going on, and being able to be there in that capacity to be kind of comfort them and calm them down, because they don't know, just like my mother didn't know. But trying to let them know like everything's probably okay, like give it a couple more days and then they'll reach back and be like, yeah, everything was fine, he called. And that means a lot though, because they always say like you're not the only one doing time, your family's doing time too. My mother was doing time with me, in her own prison state of mind, so to speak, constantly being worried about what was going on. And so that's a lot of what went on my TikTok account, and that mattered to me. Like that's really when I started to realize like there's a message to be told, and like how important it is, like telling what I went through and telling my mistakes and what I learned from it, and trying to help people to not make the same mistakes I made.
So we've got some shirts on. I got a shirt, guys, and I love it. Tell us about the brand. Tell us how you came up with this and what it means to you, because it's not just a t-shirt to
No,
you.
yeah,
It's got something important
it's
behind it.
it's to me, it encompasses everything that I talk about, and what it stands for is the slogan I use is turning cons into icons. And to me, what that means is getting out of prison, a life after prison, and not selling yourself short. just because I carry a felon moniker on my name doesn't mean I have to reserve myself to a minimum wage job or doing the minimum. I might have to work differently, harder, more creatively, but I still have big goals, dreams, and aspirations that can still achieve, that everyone else can still achieve. And I'm not going to let being a felon stop me from doing that. So am I proud to be a felon or proud for what put me in prison? Absolutely not. But I wear that and I carry it, and I know it means I got to work harder, and I'm going to work harder to accomplish what I want. And that's what the brand is about. And I wanted to put out a brand that other people can wear and like be proud that they're doing the same thing, that they're on this mission to live a law-abiding life, but they're also not going to just succumb to society and do the minimum or be okay with a minimum wage job or punching a clock. Like we can still, enact change, do big things, like, achieve big goals. That's what the brand stands for me.
I love that. And when I saw your branding and when I put the shirt on, I felt like it was kind of a message that even if you have messed up in the past, you are still worthy to be who you dream to be. You are worthy of your dreams and goals. And I just love that. So thank you for the shirt. I appreciate you so much. And thanks for taking time with us today. Any final thoughts?
It's the same thing, on social media, there's a lot of slack we catch sometimes. Why do you want to tell your story, or why do you talk about crime? And the quote I always use is that the only people ashamed to talk about their past are people not confident in their present. So am I proud of my crime? No, but I'm not going to run from it. It created who I am today, and I'm confident in who I am today. And I've been given purpose. I lost purpose when I lost my career, but now I have a purpose in life, which is, bringing motivation and inspiration to those coming after us that are in the same situation. And again, that's what the brand stands for, is that when we get out, there's still big goals, dreams, and aspirations that we can achieve. And carrying a felon moniker doesn't have to stop us from doing that. That's what matters most.
Thanks so much. Beautiful, beautiful final thoughts. Appreciate you for taking your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah.